tonight, get out your tuxedo, put on your best dress. We are going to have our very first Hall of Fame induction into the Metal Dude Hall of Fame. Who is our initial recipient? Find out next. Welcome, metal enthusiasts, to another episode of the Metal Dude Abides. If you've been following this channel, you'll know that this channel is dedicated to the history of hard rock and heavy metal. We are currently going through the late 60s all the way to current day to catalog the absolute best that heavy metal has to offer. Now, most of our weeks we've been dedicated to what we call fixing the Grammys, which is going in year by year and really highlighting the best metal or hard rock from that era and giving them the proper awards, because the Grammys have often ignored heavy metal, often ignored hard rock, and when they do try to award hard rock and heavy metal, they usually make an absolute hash of it. So we're going through and highlighting year to year who produced the best hard rock albums, hard rock songs, heavy metal albums, etc. But another institution that has completely failed the heavy metal community is the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. They have not done much better job than the Grammys. So let's go ahead and start fixing that as well. And not just honor the bands year to year, but the lifetime achievements that would come with Hall of Fame induction. And so our very first Hall of Fame inductee, the mighty, the legendary Led Zeppelin. They almost had to be the inaugural inductee because they are one of the bands that you have to go all the way back to the late 60s. Their very first album coming out in 1969. Many people would consider Led Zeppelin to be the greatest hard rock band that has ever walked the planet Earth. I might have to agree with that. They are fantastic, and they left a legacy that is still being celebrated to this day. So in order to properly honor our initial inductees, we're going to do a discography review where we review all of the studio albums of Led Zeppelin and rank them from 8 to 1. So without further ado, let's get into it. Led Zeppelin, ranking their albums. Now, whenever you rank a artist's discography, there's a couple of things you need to get out of the way right off the bat. Number one, there has to be a number 8, right? And the fact of the matter is, Led Zeppelin, let's just get it out of the way, has produced 8 very good albums. I am not going to review Coda because I don't really consider it to be one of their albums. This was done, after John Bonham's death. It's a series of outtakes and, some different things. Not really a proper album. If, for whatever reason, you feel like I should be ranking it, fine. It goes in number 9. Nothing more needs to be said about it. The other thing is a lot of people also put in tiers. So I'm going to do that as well here. So not only am I going to rank them, but I'm going to put them into 3 different categories. One being a very good album, but maybe on the inconsistent side. Not every song on there is great, for instance. Then we're going to go to near perfect, because there's several Led Zeppelin albums that are almost perfect, but we might want to, take umbrage with maybe a song or two here or there. And then finally, the perfect tier. One of the highest compliments I can give a band is to have a perfect album where every song on the album is good to excellent. And Led Zeppelin has a number of those as well. So with that in mind, let's get to number 8, In Through the Outdoor. Now you can probably figure, because of the fact it's ranked 8th, that this would also fall into that inconsistent category. This is a good album, but it's got hits and misses. One of those hits, right off the bat, In the Evening. One of the better songs on the album. I think this is one of the few songs that kind of takes us back to a more mystical time of Led Zeppelin. The rest of this album, the reason it's number 8, because it's close. Number 7 and number 8, very close to each other. The reason I went with this one as number 8 is for a couple of reasons. Number one, this is probably the least heavy album in the Led Zeppelin collection. Number two, this is probably the least bluesy album in the Led Zeppelin collection. And finally, with the exception of this song, it really is probably the least mystical. And by mystical, I don't know how else to put it. Led Zeppelin kind of would, with their vocals and their guitars, kind of produce this kind of Eastern, mystical, kind of fantastical, dreamy-like cadence that I really love. This is more straight-ahead rock and roll. So they got some really good songs on here. Fool in the Rain, very good. All My Love, very good. But these are more like your classic rock, pretty straightforward rock and roll hits, not really getting out of kind of the, the extraordinariness of Led Zeppelin. This is pretty much a kind of just meat and potatoes. Here they are, top 40 hits, but nothing really spectacular about them. Every album going forward is going to have some of the most spectacular songs in the history of rock and roll. This one has some good ones, has some misses. Hot Dog has kind of a ragtime feel to it. A lot of people like Carousel Imbra. I don't even know if I'm saying that right. But here again, and this is going to be one of those things, it's not a song worthy of 10 and a half minutes. Like, I don't mind a long song. They're not my favorite by any means. I've talked about this at length. But if you are going to have a 10 plus minute song, you got to be doing enough to really keep my interest. This song doesn't quite do that. So anyway, very good album, but it comes in at number 8. Coming in at number 7, Presence. Presence and In Through the Outdoor, really, I could have gone either way on this. I ultimately went with Presence at number 7, and it's an interesting reason why. I think it's even less consistent than In Through the Outdoor. It's got bigger hits and misses, but it's got 2 absolute monster tracks on it that dwarf anything that's on In Through the Outdoor. Achilles' Last Stand is an absolute awesome song. And again, this is one of those songs that's quite lengthy, but worth the journey. We talked about it, if you're going to go for a long song, make it a spectacular one. Achilles' Last Stand, maybe my favorite John Bonham drumming of all time right here on this one. It is absolutely worth every minute of it. And I love Nobody's Fault But Mine. Those 2 tracks alone, just, there's always that, that Hall of Fame kind of question. Would you rather have 10 pretty good tracks or, maybe have 5 good tracks, 5 not so good tracks, but the 5 tracks are just absolutely monsters? I think the tie goes to these 2 songs, just lifting Presence just slightly above into the number 7 spot. T for One is also another really good song, kind of a bluesy number. And I love a deep track on this one, For Your Life. I love the Jimmy Page solo in that song. So overall, Presence sneaks in to that number 7 spot. Coming in at number 6, Led Zeppelin 3. And we're done with this inconsistent nonsense. This album falls into the near perfection tier of the Led Zeppelin discography. First and foremost, it starts out with maybe my favorite, and if not my favorite, maybe the heaviest Led Zeppelin song. Immigrant Song. Way back in the day, the metal dude gave Robert Plant Vocalist of the Year for his performance on this song in particular. A song about Vikings coming in and rampaging through. Robert Plant screaming and belting it out. Love this song to death. But kind of an interesting thing happens after this. The rest of this is not heavy at all. A lot of acoustic numbers, a lot of lighter numbers. It's very odd because the first two Led Zeppelin albums, and we'll talk about them obviously down the road, much heavier. Led Zeppelin 3 is really that first album where they kind of lose that heaviness after Immigrant Song. Like they start off heavy, but then they kind of come away. But listen, Friends starts that kind of acoustical thing. The best way I can describe it is, Robert Plant has this beautiful, haunting voice, and they start blending this with the acoustics. I can see why they went with this a lot in the middle of the Led Zeppelin catalog, because it's very cool. Friends is kind of the first song like that. Celebration Day, really good upbeat talk song. Since I've Been Loving You, you might as well know, we'll talk about it later, but I love the bluesy, heavy bluesy version of Zeppelin that comes in here. Out on the Tiles, good. Out on the Tiles, really good, up tempo. Gallows Pole, we go back to kind of that acoustic, but heavy. One of maybe my favorite deep track on Led Zeppelin 3, Gallows Pole. Tangerine, once again, we're doing more acoustic, but I love the Jimmy Page riff on this. It just builds and builds. And one of the things that Zeppelin is very good about doing is taking a light song and just building that tension up. Tangerine, really cool, does it that way. And then That's the Way, kind of that fourth straight acoustic track. If you were probably like me, I'd heard Led Zeppelin 1 and 2 before I'd heard Led Zeppelin 3. And probably the first song I heard off Led Zeppelin 3 was Immigrant Song. This was not my favorite album for a long, long time. I kind of had to really kind of get used to it because it was such a departure from what I was used to. But now that I'm older and now I've had many years with this album, start to appreciate this kind of acoustic version of Led Zeppelin more and more. And then the last two songs I would say are just kind of filler. I don't really care for them that much, which is why they fall into the near perfection tier in the Led Zeppelin catalog. Number 6, Led Zeppelin 3. Coming in at number 5, Houses of the Holy. Another Led Zeppelin album that's going to fall into the near perfection tier. But another fantastic album, obviously. Starts off with Song Remains the Same, which is, again, a great opener. I love all the tempo changes in this. The guitar work of Jimmy Page, excellent. Maybe one of the most underrated songs in the history of Led Zeppelin follows that, the Rain Song. I've always loved that song so very much. A really good one. And then probably the best song on the album, Over the Hills and Far Away. This is a classic Led Zeppelin. Again, really bringing out that acoustic, that haunting, all of that. I would even say it might be even considered a little bit of a poor man's Stairway to Heaven because it's kind of got that same light build that slowly gets heavier as the song goes on. Now, I'm going to be honest, where this album kind of sags in the middle. We talked about Led Zeppelin 3 kind of peters out at the end. This one kind of sags in the middle, but then we come back with No Quarter and The Ocean. What a way to really end an album strong. I love The Ocean. One of my favorite Led Zeppelin tracks of all time. This album is fantastic, and it comes in at number 5, Led Zeppelin, Houses of the Holy. Whenever you put together a list, you always know ahead of time, probably if there's going to be a hot take in here or a controversy. Well, here's probably the controversial take in this one. Coming in at number 4, Physical Graffiti. Why is this controversial? Most of the discography rankings I see of Led Zeppelin have Physical Graffiti either 1 or 2 at the lowest 3. I have to put it here at 4. And hear me out. And it has to go into the near perfection, because this album does have a little bit of filler on here. And many people might disagree with that, but I am going to try to put a case together right here that Physical Graffiti should have been a single disc. Let's go through it. I think if you cut this down to 10 songs, this would have been the greatest Led Zeppelin album of all time. But instead, there's 5 songs on here you could have just taken out. And here's the thing, especially when you look at the albums that followed, those 5 songs could have been easily put on the next albums, because again, back to that inconsistency of Presence and Into the Outdoor, because they used up all this material here. If you're going to do a double album, that's great, but make sure you have, enough material and it flows properly. Anyway, let's see what you think about this. I'm gonna take the 10 songs I think should be on the album. I think that's easily could be doable in a single album, and how good it would be. All right, so let's start off with Custard Pie. That's the way the album starts. My album is also going to have that on there. Really like the work. John Paul Jones. I don't talk a lot about him in the big scheme of things. Maybe this is one of his finest moments. The Rover. Got to keep that one. That's song number 2, right? Great Jimmy Page riff on this one. Love this one. In My Time of Dying, we're going to keep this one. Back to, I love when Led Zeppelin becomes that bluesy Led Zeppelin. This was fantastic. Now, having said all that, 11 minutes. If we're gonna, this is one of those songs where it's like, could we cut this down? Is it really require that full 11 minutes? I say no. So not only am I going to keep this to 10 songs, but I'm going to shorten this baby just a little bit. 11 minutes, that's a long time to keep my attention. So keep that in mind. Houses of the Holy is going to be the 4th one we're going to keep. One of those funny stories. Why isn't Houses of the Holy on the Houses of the Holy album? Who knows? They must have been so inspired by the name of that album that it inspired them to write this song, but always found that kind of funny. Trampled Underfoot has to stay. This is absolutely, and this would finish like, okay, now this is song number 5, so Trampled Underfoot is an excellent closer for a side, really high energy, love Trampled Underfoot. Then we get the greatest Led Zeppelin song of all time, perhaps. Have to keep Kashmir. That's how you start side 2, because this is, again, number 6. We're going to do 5 and 5. Kashmir, what a great way to start the album, right? You get it right here. In the Light, a deep track that I like. Almost said a dark track. In the Light, a dark track. Come on. In the Light, a deep track that I really love. That would be my 7th. Then they have, and I don't even know how to say this, Bronnier R, which is a little acoustic number that they put in here. This is one that we could keep or we could get rid of. If we need the room, if we want to keep 11 minutes for in My Time of Dying, maybe we can take this one out. But I think it goes well in here, and I'll tell you why. Sometimes you just need a little bit of a palate cleanser. I think this is a perfect place right here. Little acoustic number, great. Then we're going to keep 10 Years Gone, number 9. And finally, we're going to finish this off at number 10, the Wonton Song, which is a nice, big, heavy finisher, just like Trampled Underfoot is a great finisher to side 1. Wonton Song finishes off side 2. If you take these other 5 songs that are on this album, you may be big fans of them. They can go on Presents. They can go on future albums. But if you put those 10 songs together, you have put together one of the great masterpieces in the history of rock and roll. As it stands, instead you have a near perfect album with some songs that are a little bit filler. I know, controversial. I know it's groundbreaking here, but let me know in the comments below, should Physical Graffiti be one album with these 10 songs, or do you prefer the double album with the 5 additional tracks? Let me know in the comments. But because there's filler, And because it ends up in the near perfect tier, it comes in at number 4. Coming in at number 3, the very first Led Zeppelin 1 album. You know what's kind of funny is as I was sitting here ranking these albums, and they're all so very good. But when you get back to the very first few albums, I will say that there is a big difference in the power generating. And as someone who really likes heavy music, I would feel very comfortable saying Led Zeppelin 1, Led Zeppelin 2, Led Zeppelin 4, the 3 albums remaining, have so much more power. You kind of, we talked about it when Led Zeppelin 3 starts to come in, you start seeing a lot more acoustic, you start kind of that mystical Eastern kind of songwriting kind of plays into it. All very good. I don't even know if you'd call it progressive. Very experimental. Led Zeppelin becomes very, tries a lot of different things. But these first few albums are bluesy and they're heavy. And it's my favorite era of Led Zeppelin, as you can tell by them being in the top 3. And so Led Zeppelin 1 comes in here. And right off the bat, you just put this on and you're like, whoa, so much more power than some of the later stuff. Really love it. John Bonham, one of the greatest drummers of all time. And listen, I talked about in the later years, Achilles' Last Stand being one of my favorite tracks of his. But boy, he really comes off in these first few albums. The production just banging it. Really starts off great. Babe, I'm Gonna Leave You. If this was your introduction to Led Zeppelin, man, this is really that first song where Robert Plant just blows it out of the water. What a great bluesy number. And then is my favorite song on this album by far, Dazed and Confused. Once again, this is kind of like a spoiler for down the road, because Dazed and Confused is that heavy and that bluesy, but this is that first time you really kind of start getting that hint of that mystical that's going to come later on, that you find out in like Cashmere and other songs down the road. This has all 3 blended in perfectly. If I were to say someone wants to go back in time and say, you know, what songs would you recommend for someone just starting out to know what Zeppelin's all about, I wouldn't go too far before I'd have Dazed and Confused in that mix. One of my all-time favorite Led Zeppelin songs. Communication Breakdown is great. How Many More Times is great. Really, the whole album is good. But it's going to end up, once again, in the near perfection mode because Your Time Is Going to Come. That's a kind of a take it or leave it song for me. Every other song on here is absolute classic Led Zeppelin right off the bat. I mean, there's a reason. Listen, when you become one of the greatest bands in the history of rock and roll, a lot of times it's because that very first album sets the stage where people go, whoa, wait a minute. That's what this one does. This one reset the entire rock industry on its, this is the new way. This is that blues. This is that heavy. When you go back, Jimmy Page doing the Yardbird stuff, bluesy, but not with this kind of power. This was just an absolute burst onto the scene. One of the greatest debut albums in the history of hard rock and heavy metal right here. Number 3, Led Zeppelin 1. One of the highest accolades I can give a band is to say that they produced a perfect album. Many great bands, have never achieved this. Led Zeppelin achieved it twice. And so right up here at the top of the list, it really gets really gets hard to separate these 2 fantastic, perfect albums. But separate them a must. So, coming in at number 2 is Led Zeppelin 2. It's interesting that, because you don't see this in today's modern rock and roll, Led Zeppelin had 2 albums in 1969. We just got through talking about Led Zeppelin 1. In the exact same year, 1969, they produced Led Zeppelin 2. I can't believe that they put 2 albums of that quality in just a few months apart from each other. But this is absolutely breathtaking Led Zeppelin. It starts out with Whole Lot of Love, one of their signature songs. If you've ever heard, Led Zeppelin on classic rock radio, this is one of those staple songs that you're going to hear, and it's a great opening track to the album. What is and what should never be is kind of a little bit of a departure. Parts of it are heavy, parts of it are light. Nice little blend of the two. I'll say it a lot, but my favorite song from Zeppelin is that heavy blues. Here in the Lemon Song, you kind of get that great combination of heaviness and blues. Great example of it here. Thank You. We start to see the Led Zeppelin acoustical. They are going to really lean in on that acoustic sound in their middle years. They put it off beautifully in this one. And then, once again, if you want to get heavy and you want to get bluesy, Heartbreaker is the epitome of the heavy bluesy Led Zeppelin feel. One of my favorite songs of all time. Once again, if someone comes up to me and says, as a beginner, as a newbie to Led Zeppelin, what songs would you recommend? This has got to be right up at the top. Love this song. Heavy. Maybe my favorite Jimmy Page riff in the entirety of the Led Zeppelin collection right here. And then there's like a lot of, a couple of really big hits here because they have Living, Loving, Made, which is one of their biggest hits, and Ramble On. Those are two of, if you hear classic Zeppelin on the radio, these are two songs that are played a lot. Two really big hits for Led Zeppelin. That's followed by Moby Dick, which is, again, probably John Bonham's signature drum song of all time. This is the song that really, I think, broke John Bonham into that upper stratosphere of drummers. Just completely crushes it on this one. And then they finish it off with Bring It On Home. A perfect album from start to finish. A heavy album from start to finish. A bluesy album from start to finish. I love Led Zeppelin 2. And I can't believe there's an album better than that. And yes, there's still one more. Coming in at number 1. This is an all-timer, folks. The perfect album, Led Zeppelin 4. The Ruins album, however you want to label it. This kind of, it's interesting in that Led Zeppelin has the numbered albums that end here before they break into the second half of their career. What a way to go. Those first 4 albums. But this is really an interesting album in that the first 2 albums, again, I would say the heaviest, the bluesiest. Led Zeppelin 3 really breaks the mold, kind of goes off in that acoustic direction. But then comes Led Zeppelin 4, which is the perfect gateway because it's still got a lot of the heaviness of the first 2 albums, but really starts to break us off into that more experimental sounds of Led Zeppelin. So right off the bat, Black Dog is that kind of heavy, bluesy. I think the Immigrant Song might be my favorite opening song on any of the Led Zeppelin albums, but if it's not Immigrant Song, it's Black Dog. Oh, what a fantastic way to start an album. And again, kind of it could go right there on those first 2 Led Zeppelin albums. Power, bluesy, beautiful. Rock and Roll follows that. John Bonham, just back to just tremendous drumming. Great, heavy song. And then we get into the Battle of Evermore, which kind of starts back into that softer, mystical type of song. And then probably the song that might be the greatest rock and roll song of all time. It's right up there, folks. Number 4 on here, Stairway to Heaven. What makes Stairway to Heaven great? We can go on and on about it. But the fact of the matter is it just does this amazing build and crescendo where, again, it starts off where you think, okay, the heavy stuff's over. We're going to get into more lighter fare. And then it just starts building and it starts building. And at the end of it, it's one of the heaviest songs in the entirety of the Led Zeppelin collection. I could go on about this particular song for forever. But if you've never heard Stairway to Heaven, I can't believe it, but some people, maybe this was a little bit before your time, and you want to say, where do I start? What song will give me the best impression of Led Zeppelin? Right here. Love this song. Now, when we flip over to the second side, now again, we're getting into, again, a little bit more of that experimental sound, because you got Misty Mountain Hop, you got Four Sticks, you got Going to California. None of those songs are particularly heavy, but they're all great songs. And then, because we haven't had a heavy one in a while, they end with an absolute classic, When the Levee Breaks. John Bonham's drumming, Robert Plant singing, Jimmy Page's guitar. This thing is an absolute masterpiece from start to finish. And really, like, if you were starting to go, is this album starting to kind of get a little too acoustical? Is it getting a little too soft? It's like, it just blows you out of the water. One of the most powerful songs in the Zeppelin collection. What a way to finish this album. Start to finish, perfection. Start to finish, you can't beat it. Like, Led Zeppelin 2 and Led Zeppelin 4 are both perfect. I guess what finally separates the two is then Stairway to Heaven just takes it over. Just a little bit, I suppose. But it's amazing that a band has this kind of quality album not only once, but twice in their career. Most bands would just there it is. There's our absolute highlight. Led Zeppelin again does it twice. And that is why they are our inaugural Hall of Fame recipients and well-deserving. 8 fantastic albums and a career that is, one of the things I was talking about the other day, unfortunately, John Bonham passes in 1980 and Led Zeppelin is no more. And think about it. That's been over 40 years ago. And yet, if you turn on a radio station, you're going to hear Led Zeppelin. I live in Denver. The radio station here, the rock and roll station here, for a long time, well into the 2000s, was playing like an hour long Get the Lead Out, where they would play an hour of Zeppelin almost every night. And it's like, that's amazing that a band that didn't produce anything after the year 1980 still has this kind of staying power. Really a testament to how great this band is. One of the all-time greats, everybody. And a very worthy first nominee into the Metal Dude Hall of Fame. And that's our show. Now, this is the part of the episode where I get to tell you to subscribe and ring the bell. Give it a thumbs up, because you don't want to miss any of this content, folks. There's going to be more people inducted into the Hall of Fame that are going to be joining Led Zeppelin. You're going to want to know when a new one has been announced. And if you like today's music, next couple of weeks, we're going to go all the way up to the year 2024, and we're going to talk about the best albums and the best songs of the year. You don't want to miss any of this content, so subscribe and be alerted to all of our new stuff. We have a new episode every Tuesday. Usually drops about 7 o'clock Denver time. But you don't want to miss it. So just get yourself an alert. Easy peasy. And the YouTube algorithm will love you forever. So there you go. In the meantime, this is the Metal Dude signing off. Take care.